Hello and welcome to part 6 of this Kawasaki Z200 series. This will probably be the last video I'll make of the little bike. I was asked an interesting question during the week, and that was, is one of these worth it compared with a modern bike? The chap that asked me, he was looking for a 125, a commuter bike, something to run to work and something to use occasionally. And when he saw this bike, he inquired about buying it. I told him it wasn't for sale, not at the moment anyway. But we had a discussion as in, was it worth having an old historic bike like this, 43 years old, or a modern bike? What would be better to run? So before I get to the cost analysis of how much this bike cost me, let's look at the pros and cons of running a historic bike. So some of the pros is, in the UK, once it becomes over 40 years old, then you can be exempt from an MOT certificate, which is a sort of road safety certificate, and from road tax. So you don't pay road tax, or you don't need to get the bike inspected every year for an MOT certificate. So there are two advantages. Well, we could look at them as advantages. Insurance wise, it's probably pretty low for a bike like this. I haven't quite got into that yet. So we have that. Some of the cons of running a bike this age is, one, it's going to require more maintenance than a modern bike. So if we take something like a Honda CBF 125, which is probably one of the ones that we can compare this bike with in terms of size, weight. I think this would have a bit more poke, a bit more power than the 125. Probably a bit nicer to ride, to be honest. Or we have something like a KTM Duke 200, which would probably cost a bit more than what one of these would cost. However, it's a different breed. It's a bit more fun, a bit more power, etc. So we have the pros of not having to get it MOT'd, not having to get it taxed, and we have the cons of a bit more maintenance. So when I say a bit more maintenance, what do I mean? This particular bike runs a point system, so you have to renew the points or the condenser, and probably things like setting the valve clearances would be a bit more regular. And basically that would be about it. You know, some of the other cons would be is if you had to replace some parts. Now, some parts for like a Honda CBF 125, they're readily available, they're easy to get, there's so many of these bikes around. But something like this, not so easy. Even things like this, I had to wait a long time to get a badge for that. Don't get me wrong, some things are easy to come by. And you know, like the exhausts are readily available, points and plugs, things like that. But things like that are quite difficult, or even the air filter is difficult on this bike. And if you had to replace something through wear and tear, then you might struggle to get certain parts for it. Whereas a more modern bike, you're more or less likely to be able to get the parts. So in my conversation with the chap, he wanted it as a commuter, and what I suggested to him was buy the modern bike. And the reason for that is just what I've explained there. If you need parts for a bike, if you're going to run it through the winter, if you're going to be using it on a regular basis, I think you're better off with something more modern. Parts are available. Okay, you maybe have the tax and MOT and stuff like that, but it's really minimal when you weigh it up like that. So that is, I believe, what he's going to do. So why would you buy a bike like this? Why would you bother with a bike like this? I mean, why did I even buy it? And one of the things I like about this bike is that its simplicity. And for me, older bikes, they have that appeal to me, the sort of traditional look, and to me this just looks like a proper little motorcycle. You know, this is how I imagine in my mind that a motorcycle should look, and not look like some kind of praying mantis or some kind of weird insect. That's just my opinion on it. But also the simplicity. It's easy to ride, it's a nice little bike, and bar, you know, the difficulty of getting certain parts, I'm quite willing to put up with that, because I will use it occasionally. It's not going to be an everyday bike for me. I do use a more modern one for everyday stuff. So for the occasional wee ride out or the short trip or whatever, then this is ideal. So cost wise, you know, let's look at costs. Let's look at how much it would cost for something like this in comparison to something like the CBF 125 or the KTM Duke 200. There's very few bikes in this sort of category, in the 200cc category. There's plenty in the 125s. But I'm comparing with the CBF just purely because it's quite similar in some ways. A 2010 CBF, I looked up one on eBay there, and the price of that was, I think, roughly £1,200–1,300, something like that. The KTM Duke, a 2014, was about £1,000 more. But again, it's a kind of apples and oranges comparison when we're looking at that bike. But just for the sake of it being a 200cc. I haven't seen any of these for sale for a little while. The last one I saw was about £1,750, I think it was. And to be fair, I think it needed a bit of work. It didn't look as well sorted as this little one. But for the sake of this video, I'm going to break down the cost of what it actually cost me to get this to the state it's in just now. And I know it will vary from what turns up in your area or your country even. So it's going to really depend on many factors. But I'll just discuss purely what it cost me and what it's at just at its present state just now. So the bike itself, it cost me £551, and that was through bids on eBay. If you go back and look at the series of videos, you'll see how that came about, and I was delighted at that price. I was really pleased at getting it for that. The bike looked great. It didn't look much different from how it looks now. However, if you do go through the series of videos, you'll see the problems I actually had with it. So, for new parts included an ignition switch, filters, bolts, cables, a tyre, piston rings, gaskets, indicators. There was also the bolts for the engine casings, and I think that was it. An exhaust clamp, you know, things like that. These were the things I bought that were new, and the total cost for all of those parts was £181. New old stock parts. Now, new old stock parts, what I mean by that is something that's been lying around for a while in a box, and it's new, and somebody sells it off as new old. And I've only had one item for this bike that was new old stock, and it's not even a genuine Kawasaki item, and that was the silencer there. That silencer cost me £50. You know, fair enough. Second-hand parts. Now, second-hand parts, I really relied on getting second-hand parts because, for one, I don't think I could have afforded new parts, and the other thing is, were they even available? And if they were available, what it would have cost me. So second-hand parts was the stator, the rotor, the fork yokes, fixings for the indicators, carb parts, the rear rack and badges, and the total amount there was £174. That's what I spent on second-hand parts. Now, I have a big thank you for the Kawasaki Z200 forum in Facebook, because most of those parts were sourced through there, and you know who I'm talking about. Very helpful, that forum, so please look it up if you have one of these bikes or interested in one of these bikes. So that gave me a grand total of £956. That's what it cost me for this bike. Now that's not including the hours of work, obviously, that was spent on the bike. Again, check that out in the video. But to me, that's worth it. You know, I had good fun in rebuilding the bike and sorting out the problems and getting it to the condition it's in. And, you know, again, it's horses for courses. If we look at a bike that's about the £1,000 mark, to me, that's good value. That's worth it to me. If I sell it, maybe I'll get £1,700 for it. That might cover my time that I worked on it. I don't know. But I'm not intending on selling it at this point. I'm intending on keeping it for a while and using it. So, you know, ask me any questions you have in the comments. I'm really pleased that what I have here, I hope this video has been helpful to you in some way, or given you some insight into what it's like with historic bikes, historic vehicles, and that's about it. So I'll catch you in the next one. I've got another few videos coming out very soon, so if you haven't liked and subscribed, then please do. I appreciate that very much. So take care of yourself, ride safe, and I'll catch you soon. Bye.